Charlie,
Hey Dave,
good to see you, mate.
good to see you too. How are you doing today?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I'm very much looking forward to this. Bit nervous because it's just the nature of anything recorded, anything kind of, I guess, new. But yeah, I'm really excited and very grateful you've had me on.
Oh, well, I'm really happy that you've given your time so kindly, so generously. I know you're a super duper busy person, man. You're busy, aren't you? You're proper busy.
I feel like we're all busy in this industry, but yeah, I have got a 1-year-old daughter. I've got a private practice, working in NHS, doing a doctorate. It's a lot on at the same time, but I quite like being busy. I think it'd be very inauthentic for me to sit here and go, "Oh, I'm hating life." I'm actually really enjoying how much is going on. I think it just sometimes, yeah, can be a little bit hard to manage if there's sort of unexpected things happening, like illnesses or that kind of thing. But yeah, no, busy. But let's be honest, Dave, you're not exactly any less busy.
I don't know. I think on the down low, I'm trying to be not so busy. But yeah, I,
Um,
I
yeah.
am busy. I am busy. So you're we've got quite a lot to discuss. I've known you for feels like an eternity. First time I met you was at a barbecue.
Yeah.
I think, is that right? It was at a barbecue.
Correct.
Uh,
In broad, yeah.
Yeah, and you just I turned around, you were there, and you're like, "Hey, all right, Dave, I'm Charlie," and we'd spoken loads, didn't we? But we just never met.
Yeah, exactly. I knew who you were both in the context of the work you had done, because the organization I was working in at the time, and you were working on certain projects together. And I'd met you in relationship to some of the clients I was working with there, or patients, depending on what word you want to use. So I kind of knew a lot about you professionally, and I guess personally at that point less so, but a bit. But it was the first time we actually face to face met, which was really nice.
Yeah, and I think we probably hugged it out, and then the bromance commenced. So that was a while ago. So just for anyone listening, what is it you do, Charlie?
So I've got a bit of a wordy official title. I'm a developmental psychologist and adolescent psychotherapist. And at the moment, I work between two different setups, in the sense that I work for an eating disorder unit for the NHS. And I'm also working in private practice, have been for about 5 years now. And I mainly see adolescents, so 12 to 25, range of different mental health issues and challenges. Do quite a lot of work at the moment. This is admittedly more today than it has been through the 5 years, but quite a lot of my client base at the moment suffer with sort of histories of sexual and violent abuse. I do quite a lot of work with people who have eating disorders, where it's appropriate in private practice. I appreciate you can't take on the more severe cases because they need more containment and higher level of support. And then I also do, at the moment, an enormous amount of work with neurodivergent populations, both in private work and previously for my doctorate as well in placements, which is really interesting. Particularly because as someone neurodivergent myself, I almost feel like I learn a lot about me while I'm in settings learning about others in some respects. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
That's my official role is kind of the developmental psychology, adolescent psychotherapy, and that intersection, I guess.
Okay. Well, massive respect, because there's a lot of people out there in the world. Do you work just in the UK?
No, I do work abroad, but only online. Obviously, I'm not a sort of traveling therapist, and I am very mindful of where I am and I'm not allowed to work, because I know different countries have different rules and different jurisdictions. So I have abroad. I still have clients abroad now, but I'd say like 95% of my work has been in the UK. Yeah, or actually at the place I've been working when I have been abroad, because I used to work abroad in a clinic.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, loads to explore. My God. Okay, so divergent. Is that right saying? I can never say words sometimes.
If I've understood it correctly, and I hope with my level of exposure to it, I'm not going to get this wrong. Neurodiversity encompasses everybody. So even I've always hated that phrase, typically developed minds, but people who have sort of typically developed brains or minds would also be on the spectrum of neurodiversity. So it's kind of all of us.
Mm.
Neurodivergence is the atypical, again, a phrase I despise, but just to use it as it's the clinical phrase that does get used. People who are atypically developed,
Mhm.
so with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. I know OCD is now often being put on um, the neurodivergent spectrum as well. So those kinds of conditions. I say conditions; they're not. I should be very mindful with my wording. Actually, they're not necessarily conditions. I think it's actually a peer of mine on my course who really helped me sort of re-educate myself in this. That when we think of neurodivergence, very often we're almost looking at it from the lens of its mental health problems, and actually it's not. It's a different neurological structure and setup, and then maybe the society around those people doesn't help them basically to facilitate what they need to function and thrive. So it's not that there's something wrong with them; it's that there's something potentially wrong with the sort of more macro system that they fit in, and they just have a very different way of doing things or feeling and thinking.
Yeah, I see it like so the lens, I talk for myself. I work with, as you know, you do too. We work with a huge, diverse, broad spectrum of fellow humans, and all of them uniquely incredible, in my opinion. Um, and for myself, I have learned so much about my own self through that mirror of being in front of someone and going, yeah, I kind of yeah, I get that as well, kind of thing. And it's like I've never formally been diagnosed with anything. I don't think really, apart from yeah, you've got a shitload of PTSD, mate. You know what I mean? Because you've been a bit of a wreckhead. I'm an ex-Hellraiser, who redeemed himself. So there's a little bit of sort of, post-carnage to sort of, wade through, but, I've done an almighty job of doing that over the years, and on that continues, and I love doing it, I'm it used to be a really scary landscape, to talk. But now I just love it. Not in a weird way. It's just like, it's a good mindset to have. He's like, bring it on. I really enjoy self-development and my own sense of evolution. So um I'm fascinated by all of that, that there's so many different things popping up now. Do you think how do you see it? Because over your timeline of you doing this,
Mm.
do you think it's changed because it's almost like I hate to use the word trend,
Yeah, no, no, yeah. Well,
but
it's an appropriate word in some respects, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely has. I'm always very mindful when I say have things when I'm asked, sorry, if things have changed. Is it that they've changed or are they just seen differently now? And so it sort of looks like a change. So like I'm always mindful when you see studies saying we've got more young people now with anxiety and depression than ever before. So
Mm,
is that true? Do we have more people that have this, or do we just have higher levels of awareness of it? Do we have more people seeking treatment and being open and vulnerable with their problems or their challenges? Who knows? I mean, even as an assumption there, isn't it, that it's a problem or a challenge for people? Some people are managing their anxiety in a way that doesn't necessarily feel problematic. But I'm, I think from a neurodivergent perspective, and also I think about this with eating disorders, I'm definitely seeing trends evolving that are very different to how it was when I was maybe a kid in school or pre me working in the industry, sort of how I really saw this happening, particularly in terms of diagnosis. I mean, it's just anecdotal. This obviously isn't based in research because it's just my experience with my client groups. But I have never seen so many people being diagnosed with ADHD and autism in such a short space of time. I've also never seen so many people, I think, either don't fit the criteria who are being diagnosed or don't fit the criteria and are kind of either not assessed, so they haven't been put through the sort of formal process, or they have been assessed by someone who's done a quite quick, let's say, fire job and not really taken the time to get to know the person in the presentation. But yeah, it feels like there's a lot of over and under diagnosing going on. Um, and as I sort of position myself as a bit of a humanist in the essence of I like to value the subjective experience of the individual, I like to understand the phenomena for sort of more holistically than just like you are this list of diagnoses. Um, But yeah, I mean, there's in my practice, I see very, very frequently now ADHD is being referred to me. I'm being referred to a lot of people with anorexia, bulimia. Like there seems to be these trends occurring, particularly in young people. And I don't want to turn this into a kind of social media rant, but I can't ignore the fact that I think a lot of the people I'm seeing who are struggling most were kind of born, if you will, into the social media age rather than had an adultish lens and then kind of worked it
Yeah.
themselves while it was happening. Um,
Well, I'll save you from having to get into it because I don't mind getting into it. I'm the first one to get into it. But yeah, no, I concur what you're saying. I agree. I see what you see from, working, doing what I do, which is very similar. We're very different in what we do, but it's a similarity in the people that we engage with are in that category, in that place in their lives. It's not their fault. These young people, it's not their fault. They're born into, you know, it's all they know, really. I mean, it's. I feel like we're in this time right now where it's just a very peculiar stage in evolution, where we're sort of bridging the old world to this sort of new world that we're kind of in, without getting too deep and into it all.
no, I
And I
agree.
think that, yeah, and I think they're kind of, it is like, the guinea pig kind of, Generation X. Is that the right sort of term to use? A Generation X of, you know, guinea pigs.
It's sometimes quite hard to know where the line is drawn. So, was it millennials? Was it Gen Z, Gen X? I mean, there's so many time frames that overlap in my mind as to like where did the problem begin? And I guess you could
Yeah.
go back forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to be honest, I should know this, but I'm pretty sure I'm a millennial. I'm born in 1990. I think that makes me a millennial, if I'm not mistaken.
You was born in 1990.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. I was in a warehouse, um, having an illegal party, doing ecstasy and acid, in 1990.
Well, I was having a slightly different time to you, probably just as out of it. But I born in 1990. I think I'm a millennial, but my generation, if I can be so bold as to claim ownership of the entire lot, um, we are a generation who grew up where social media and sort of the iPhone, if you will, just to use a kind of the first smartphone example, were kind of coming out when I was sort of mid-teens, um, early to mid-teens. And I think the thing with that is, yeah, okay, brain's still very much developing, still a long time before my sort of judgment cortex would be in any way what we might refer to as fully formed. I'm always slightly against the idea that we fully form judgment. It's like, I think the brain evolves and changes over time a lot more than people think after 25, but certainly to 25, we know there's an enormous amount of development and shifting and sort of neuroplasticity. But I had enough of a lens, at least, on what these things were at that age to be able to start engaging with them in a potentially different way. I think it's very different to these people who were born. Like I think, for example, of my younger brother, he's now 18, so he was born. I think I was like 16 or 15 when he was born. Um, he was born into a world where like smartphones and social media were basically there from birth. Like you could see it; it was there at his fingertips. I think my stepmom and dad did an amazing job of raising him to not be someone who's sort of social media heavy or focused. But I know a lot of his peers, for example, a lot of the people in my who come to see me in my private practice who are the same age as him, 18, 19, let's say, just as an example. I mean, they're telling me they're spending 5 to 7 hours a day on social media. And then when you really dig into it and really kind of get into the crux of what's happening, there's a lot of really fucked up stuff that's being put on these platforms that people aren't really talking about or don't really get in any way regulated or dealt with. And
Mm.
I mean, I'm aware an 18, 19-year-old in this society is technically an adult in many ways, but it is still a relatively young mind, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't help but, that term adult, I mean, 18, adult, I mean, I struggle with that one, if I'm honest, because from my own experience, when I was 18, I was a man baby when I hit 30s. You know, I was. I never grew up. I kind of missed that. You know, I went on. I left school at 16 and went on summer holiday and never really sort of came off of it until my 30s. So, you know I'm not alone with that. So, you know, I feel like um, I had a dear friend of mine, Sonia, who Sonia Ryan. She runs a charity, a non-profit, and it's all to do with online safety. We did an episode, and she talks a lot about this, about you know, giving um, things that are designed for adults to adolescents, teenagers, younger people. Is that a responsible thing we should be doing? Well, yeah, they're an adult, they're 18, but it's like, well, you know, are they really an adult at 18? I don't know. That's the question. I don't know.
Yeah, and I can't answer it. I mean, like, age is a number, sort of the social constructs we put around age, like calling people children or adults, or you're old enough, you're not old enough. I mean, they're all kind of quite arbitrary in some respects. And I mean, I have learnt wisdoms from 12-year-olds I've worked with that outweigh some of the 56-year-olds I know in terms of their emotional development. So I'm always also mindful, in the same way you're going 18, 19, is that an adult? I don't know. I'm also mindful to be like 12, 13, is that like
Yeah.
these people are super, super ahead of that curve.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And it's always a bit of a sort of crapshoot when you try and, I think any time you try and define anything, it's a bit, I mean, I'm getting a bit more philosophical now, but it's always a bit hard to define anything into an actual neatly packaged box, such as adulthood or childhood. I mean, even my work as an adolescent therapist, the parameters are 12 to 25, because that's what I've been told adolescence is. It's not really I mean, I could, in theory, I could work younger, I could work older. I've kind of just that number because it made sense. But yeah, the brain is always complex, and I'm no stranger to the fact that, I mean, my doctorate, I think, has taught me this more than anything. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything. It's kind of like one of those. If you'd spoken to me, let's say like 3 or 4 years ago, when I was earlier in my sort of private practice journey, if you will, and I was kind of the budding, young, very puppy dog like therapist, and you'd ask me questions along the lines of like, do you think like you're a good therapist? Yeah, I do think I'm a good therapist. Like, absolutely. I know what I'm doing. I know how to work with this kind of person, this kind of presentation. And like, I know what to do when this happens. And the more I do it, the more I'm like, I have no fucking clue, but I know that I'm like, by knowing I have no clue, I'm much more open actually to anyone with anything. It's not a bad thing to feel like I'm sort of more and more, I don't know, but it can be quite confronting because, as you know, in your work, mate, like sometimes we're dealing with really grisly, really nasty, very, like really, really serious shit. And it can be extremely hard to hold that if you have that voice in your head that's also like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this, or like, I don't know what to do, or like, how do I hold that much pain with somebody? Like, how do we really do this as a job? It can be a lot. I love it. Content
Yeah.
can be a lot.
Yeah, that's where your the skill, the ability, and I've heard this said by many people, and I know it to be true for myself. You know, just holding the space is enough.
Yeah.
You know, because other people, there's some people that just can't even do that. You know, so just holding the space is enough. And that's what you provide, and that's incredible. Yeah, it's a deep one, man. And I don't think, like you say, you know, having the answers. Do we really have the answers? I think for me, it's about just remaining, because I was, yes, that grandiosity of I know best and I know it all. Oh, you know, I've had that. Of course, I've been through that one. But now I've realised, like you, that it's good to be, as good as it's to be the teacher per se. It's good. It's good to remain the student. You know,
Beginner's attitude. Totally.
yeah, beginner's mind always. You know,
Yeah.
what
Worry.
what do I need to learn? What do I need to know? Because I don't know it all. Um, so yeah, it's hit and miss, man. Everything we're talking about is a lottery. Everything. It's just like it's the lottery, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think there's an interesting word for it, isn't it? Because it's a lottery where a lot of us didn't volunteer to buy the tickets either. Just kind of,
Good way of putting it.
yeah, you just wake up and that's your context, and that can be exceedingly painful actually. Because I mean, I'll speak for myself rather than put you in the same category as me, even though you are also these two things. But as a white man in this culture, um, I'm no stranger to the fact that that's afforded me opportunities or securities in our society or in sort of more wider context that might be incredibly different for other people that maybe don't fall into those. Again, we're talking categories, aren't we, in a way? But I have colleagues, I have peers who are people of color, or obviously in our industry, as we both know, there's profoundly more women or not cisgender males, let's say, than there are cisgender males working in this space. And oppression, that kind of thing, is a very real problem. And I think I'll make it my own. I'll take ownership of it for myself. Like, I can sometimes forget that the lottery ticket that's afforded me most of my opportunities to become this therapist, to become this person, to kind of engage in the world in the way I do. I didn't buy that ticket. It just got stamped for me at birth, and then here we are. Obviously, we also have to take responsibility for our choices that we then do make. Like, I could have gone other things, but yeah, I mean, it's also, whenever we're balancing the sort of the reality with the fantasy of all of this, it's really complex, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we live in a world where there are real things that we can all kind of see and touch and understand, but there's also our own subjective experience of it. There's our own kind of way of understanding our relationship to those things, and all of it's deeply, deeply affected, I think, by our lived experience, our past. And I'm a big, big fan of Bessel van der Kolk and these people that have kind of, in our society, have started to promote more of an idea of looking at trauma, not just from the lens of your life, but like, look at what happened to your parents, what happened to their parents, look at your ancestry, look at lineage, look at heritage. Don't ignore these things just because you aren't in that situation now. So yeah, it's always very, to be completely blunt and candid, it's fucking complicated.
Yep. All right. Well, look, I think I want to ask you a question. Right. I was thinking, right. So everything you was just saying, when you was younger,
Yeah.
did you wake up one day and go, I know what I'm going to be, and I'm going to go and do that? What did you want to do? Do you remember like that sort of? Because
Oh yes,
yeah.
but it wasn't being a therapist. No way. I always wanted to be a footballer. I was
Really?
Yeah, I was a pretty handy footballer as a kid. I mean, handy in my own small pond. I think if I'd had a more macro lens on the whole thing, I might have not wanted that wish as much as I did. But I was let's say, an exceedingly good player in a small school. Represented Southeast England in an international tournament. Was like, I am going to be the next fucking David Beckham. Like, this is going to happen. Got injured at 13, 14, at which point I mean, if I was being realistic today, I would never have made it as a footballer. That wasn't going to happen. But when I was injured and had that kind of reality check for myself and suddenly assessing my options, it was like, well, I don't want to do anything else. I don't really care, and blah, blah, blah. And I had quite a tumultuous youth, it'd be fair to say. The therapist, like, waking up and going, I want to be a therapist, only happened after I had my own really serious turn with mental health. Like, I was quite oblivious to mental health, if I can use that term, teenager and young adult. And in my sort of early-ish 20s, so I think I was about 22, 23, I had a very, very intense breakdown, which really blindsided me. It kind of felt like I went overnight from being totally okay to completely unable to function. And I've always used the term, rather than saying I was suicidal, I didn't want to be alive, but I was not. I think there's a very important need to distinguish that for me, because when I hear clients who are kind of attempted suicide or have actually actively, that is attempted suicide, who are suicidal in that way of wanting to like take their life and then actively plan it or take action. And obviously, if they're coming into my practice, it didn't work or didn't happen. Didn't work. That's a horrible phrase for that, isn't it? It didn't work. It didn't.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean.
It didn't unfold that way.
Yep.
But I was never like, that wasn't really my story. I was much more like, I just don't want to be alive, and I wanted something else to do that for. That I wanted something to end my suffering. And then I went and saw a therapist against my will. In some respects, I was like, no, fuck this. I'm fine. Like, I'll work it out. But then I also realized, actually, I'm at a point now where I'm either going to like completely waste away to nothingness, or I need someone to actually help me pick myself up. And I went to see a woman called Karen Levy, who was just extraordinary for me, actually. Managed to navigate the quite aggressive, feisty, arrogant young man I was, boy, really, and kind of made me see a little bit more of a big picture of what was going on, what I was really doing in my life as well. I think it was really interesting her balance of calling me out for the reality of my situation while also having the love and care to hold me at that moment. That's really something I have since taken on as a therapist a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that's a real skill if you can use it. Um, but no, mate, I mean, like, prior to my early 20s breakdown, if you had said to me, you're going to be a therapist one day, I'd have laughed you out of the room. I'd have been like, not a fucking chance, mate. Which is why when I meet, it's funny I should say this, because when I meet clients for the first time and they're like, therapy is for fucking idiots, I'm like, oh, just no interest. Like, I was you. I know that feeling. You like, fuck this. This is the bollard. At some stage, I mean, not everyone admittedly moves out of that mindset, but I certainly had a profound fall from grace when I realized, actually, this is the thing that's potentially saving my life.
Yeah. I thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing that, because there's so many without naming names and calling people out, there's so many professionals that I've come across who wouldn't dare fucking admit what you just said, because they're too fucking cool for school. They want to be the one that's sort of got their shit together, which of course you've got your shit together now, but I'm a bit suspicious of a lot of professionals because they're just too fucking together for my liking. Do you know? There's some great people out there, but I'm suspicious of a few. But anyway, not getting into all of that.
No, but it is, vulnerability is important. I also, I mean, look, I will have no idea if any of my clients, former, current, or future, will ever listen to this. And obviously that in itself is sort of like an ethical thing to work through with them in the room. But I'm a profound advocate of the mindset that, how can I expect somebody in front of me to be intensely vulnerable if I'm unwilling to acknowledge my own vulnerability? That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I'm also an open book in the sense that I recognize that my journey is part of what makes me the therapist I am. So if I try and dislocate that part of myself off and be like, yeah, it's not relevant, I'm just lying to myself and my clients.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily go into sessions being like, oh, I had a great time, this has happened. But I think it's just resonating with the fact that, like, this is the reality of why I became a therapist.
Yeah.
It's always going to be there. There's a brilliant book, I don't know if you've read it, mate, called The Myth of the Untroubled Therapist by Marie Annan.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's exquisite. In essence, I mean, I'm summarizing a much more complicated and beautifully written piece of work, but in essence, like, the idea that our clients have that we're all these like unicorns of well-being who are just like, we don't even feel anything anymore that doesn't feel just like perfectly manageable and regular. It's just absolute horseshit. Like, we're struggling as well. Like,
Of course.
most of us have our own therapists or we turn to. We can also be in crisis. I think there's a bit of a need sometimes as mental health professionals to be more honest with the fact that, like, it's not that I'm in the position of power where I'm so well that I can now offer you something like that. It's like, no, I'm learning every day how to try and manage this messy world that we live in. If I can offer you something, that's great. If not, then
Yeah.
we can try.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% am in your camp with that. I just feel like we need that humanity, and you can smell it, you can feel it. It's and young people especially, they can smell a fucking rat a mile off. Honestly, to put it mildly, because the amount of people I engage with, who open up to me. You know, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not qualified to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm none of that. I don't proclaim to be, because I leave that to great people like yourself, right? And work alongside that. But the young people that, it doesn't have to be a young person, anyone that I've engaged with who's sort of anti that approach, therapy, whatever, typical, whatever you want to call it, it's usually because they don't, like exactly what you said, they just don't feel that humanity part. They don't feel that component, which is vital. Like you said, I was no way gonna fucking well open up my can of worms to someone who was looking down his nose at me with his little notepad,
Yeah.
asking me really fucking banal fucking questions that I just don't really feel compliant to answer. And that's a common thing, and I think that's why there's a lot of stigma attached to it. And it's really refreshing, and this is why I wanted to get you on, because I fucking dig you, man.
I think there's such a high level of bromance here that this is like, I mean, I could easily be throwing it back at you, because I mean, you just, as an example, you just said, you know, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not qualified in these things or whatever. True, but I I hope that the listeners understand that just because people are those things, it doesn't make them more qualified to actually speak about these things. Like, I think that's something I'm always mindful of with this industry, particularly if I'm referring people, like trying to give people other options in mental health that aren't me, if I'm full, or if like the specific needs they have, I can't actually meet. You know, like we have an industry that's almost set up slightly topographically, in the sense that there's sort of like the medical side of it, like psychiatrists are almost sitting at the top in terms of like the duty of care and their kind of knowledge base and their training and their qualifications and their, I guess you could argue also their pay, available sort of like salary or whatever you want to call it. And then there's sort of like, you know, I'm not going to go through the topography, because it's obviously also, it's not necessarily real. It's kind of slightly, in different contexts, it will be slightly different. So sometimes it might be a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist. Sometimes it might be a coach or a specialist sort of behavioral interventionist that's sort of sitting in that space in a more higher role, if you see what I mean, in that system. But I'm I'm a big believer that whilst qualifications, pieces of paper, training, CPDs, they are massively, massively important. And I know that everyone, actually, I know in mental health does them. I think it's really important not to be like, well, who's the most qualified person? Because then you might actually miss the human that can meet you. And Dave, if there's one thing I'll say, you might have had other listeners, sorry, other people who have been on the podcast say it. And you might have had listeners or people who know you who will already say it. But I mean, your ability to meet a human where they're really at is extraordinary. And that's very rare. It's a gift. And I think that for me, when I think about the work you do, yeah, okay, you don't have like letters coming out your ass after your name, but actually, would I feel safe to give someone who's really in crisis you as a pair of hands to like hold and contain their experience? 100 fucking percent. And I think that's important because as a therapist, for me, I mean, I might have loads of letters after my name. That's not what makes me, in my opinion. I'm only speaking here about my own experience and my own opinion, of course, but I don't think that's what makes me a good therapist at all. I think if anything, I mean, again, I don't necessarily think of myself as a good therapist. Like I said earlier, I'm kind of a growing therapist, and hopefully I'm becoming more and more useful to people. But it's a complicated science, isn't it? It's a very inexact science. But yeah, like, you know, the humanity part for me is so important, because if I sit in front of a client and they go, well, of course he can help me with my eating disorder because he's a master practitioner, he knows his shit, he's got these 18 certificates on his wall. That's not necessarily going to be the thing that helps that person to recover. Like, it might be the fact that I share that I had a lived experience of an eating disorder and it was really fucking difficult. And here are the things that, you know, maybe we share that might actually make you feel less alone in this, because it's often, and it's a balance, isn't it? Because I'm aware your job and my job are different in these regards, like the parameters around what they term self-disclosure, I guess, more generally. Like, how much of yourself should you disclose? I mean, we're always disclosing something. I wear a wedding ring, for example. Like, you can see that if you're in the room with me. But at the same time, like, I'm quite a self-disclosing and vulnerable therapist with people because I recognize that A has worked for me. So there is a bit of
Mm.
a parallel process, and I can own the fact that that's an assumption I then make might be useful to others. But I always try and frame it through, like, please tell me to shut up if this isn't valuable. Not sort of like, you must listen. I'm so wise. It's more, this is, I've been through this. I struggled with this. Is this useful to you to know? But I've never understood that kind of white coat, clipboard, blank slate kind of style of therapy, because I sure it can work wonders for certain people, but I wouldn't tell that person a fucking thing.
Well, thank you, Charlie, for what you said. I mean, I think it has changed. I think it has changed marginally. You know, there are people like you out there, more so than there used to be. But there's still definitely, from what I've seen, those that aren't. Um, and, you know, I've been all over the world doing what I do, and it appears to be, you know, similar cases it doesn't matter where you go. And it's just, you know, how far is someone willing to push the boundaries, the parameters of what they've been taught, you know?
Yeah.
And are they just staying true to what they believe in? And that's subjective to whoever. I mean, there's no right or wrong, but the outcome is going to be very evident and different in the context of what you're getting and what you're sitting in front of. Now, if you're sitting in front of someone who's just, you know, like yourself, more willing to just open up and just share a little bit of that vulnerability and humanity to the, you know, the person that's seeking counsel and needing that help. I know, I just know that they're going to be more inclined to feel safe in that space. They're like, oh, this guy gets it.
Yeah. Or at least, I mean, I would say from my experience, the safety part's integral in the sense that I've had clients who I've worked with in private practice for 4.5 years who it it took anywhere from 9 months to 3 years to get them to really feel comfortable to open up about things. And often one of the more obvious shifting points is when I get the feedback from them. They go, "Do you know what? I didn't think it was possible to have a therapist who would actually say I struggle as well," or like would actually say, "Do you know what? Whilst I don't understand your context, like I had it in a different way because of different genetics, different environment, different heritage, different this, different that. But I know what it is to feel alone. I know what it is to feel scared. I know what it is to be traumatized. Like we share in this, and there's something about that that can be quite powerfully healing just to know you're sat in the room with someone who's not just like really well qualified to understand your experience. They actually lived some of it.
Yeah.
Powerful shit. And for me, like I said, with Karen, I mean, my first therapist, and actually I've had it subsequently with all therapists I've seen at some level, which is why I think they worked out as being great therapists with me. But I'll never forget the moment that Karen shared. I won't say what she shared because that's her prerogative, and I don't want to. I think confidentiality perspective, that'd be very unethical to just blurt out to the general public. But she shared something in the session with me about her own experience of pain, let's say, and it was such an important moment for me because in therapy up until that point, she was very helpful already. It wasn't like I needed that to engage at all. Like I was already on board and I was kind of working, relatively speaking, as much as I could at that point with her. But there was something about that that just, it totally shifted me. I went from sort of like you don't understand this, but like you're qualified, so therefore you kind of do. Like maybe when you go see the GP, you're like, you know what I've got, so therefore you must be able to help, but you haven't necessarily had it yourself. Just suddenly feeling like, fuck, you get it, you get this, you get what it's like to have extraordinary suffering. And therefore I felt more comfortable to talk about my own. Now, obviously I project that into my work now. I have actually, I'll be honest, I've never had a client or patient, and I'm aware that from the perspective of they might not want to share this anyway, even if they did feel it, I might not know. But I've never had anybody say to me, you're like, I don't like the fact that you shared some part of your own experience. I've definitely shared parts of my experience that are probably less relevant to people. It's also always a bit complicated with adolescent work because one of the things I was trained to do very early on is like, you want to be a little bit more like chummy or people-y with these kind of younger clients,
Mm.
you just come across like Mr. I know my shit, listen to me. It's a bit too paternalistic, and it's probably quite off-putting.
Yeah.
So always boundaries are a big thing, but obviously I'm just mindful. I want to make sure that the person sat across from me can really feel that like I'm willing to be vulnerable too.
Yeah, 100%. I, just reminds me of when I used to, I kinda cut my teeth doing what I do with working with, especially, like, younger people, by going into the education system. I used to do a lot of talks in schools, do a lot of workshops, and we had to do a lot of work around safeguarding.
Yeah,
A lot of training around safeguarding and, holding that boundary, healthy, safe boundary for myself
yeah,
and obviously the person and the people that we're gonna be in front of. And I remember when I first started doing it, as intimidating and as freaking scary as it was, it's your toughest gig to get in front of them people in school. And me sharing my life story, my vulnerability, my car crash story, that came good. And I used to go in front of them, and I remember the early days, I worked out really quickly that I need to get on their level. And I need to, for me, the magic formula I worked out was to go straight back to my school days, and start to talk about my school experience because that's the thing straight away. There's an instant connector then because I'm on the level. So that's what I learned to do, and it was really effective. And I saw the impact that that brought, and I saw that when I spoke my truth, they were more open to speaking their truth back and asking questions that I knew were coming from a place of vulnerability. So I learned that. That's how I sort of started to, get on my own journey of what I'm doing. Do you think that is symbolic of being effective in what you do, with the younger people? Do you ever, because that boundary you have to keep?
yes. I was about to say, I think where it becomes important is so I've had several supervisors who have said this to me, but the first one was my supervisor, Jason Upton, who is an extraordinary man. I learn, I just learn so much from him every single time we meet. He's just an amazing mind and extremely good at holding space, even in supervision for the clients who he has never even met. And is very clever sort of skill. But anyway, rather than concentrate our time blowing smoke up Jason's ass, which I could definitely do for an extra hour, I will focus on what you shared. We would have supervision about it was very early in my private practice, and I had made a self-disclosure in a session, and I brought it to supervision being like, I'm not sure if it was helpful. And it was a self-disclosure about eating disorders. I was basically sharing that I had had a history of self-induced vomiting for 12 years, and that basically I understood the ramifications of this as a kind of secretive behavior within the remit of an eating disorder, and like it can do some damage. And it was sort of trying to be relational and kind of help this person who was also purging understand, A, you're not the only person in the world that purges. B, I can tell you that there are effects that sort of outlive the what you're doing right now that might be worth thinking about. And then also just try and connect in that kind of like, I understand this and it hurts. It's difficult. And if it's your way of coping, then I understand the difficulty in trying to replace it with something else. And I took it to Jason. Jason said, I want you to always ask yourself one question when you're sitting with someone, and this kind of comes up, which is, am I self-disclosing for the service of the client? Like, am I saying this because I think it is of value to the person in front of me? Is it going to be either helpful or connective, or is it really like, am I attuned? And I guess that's really the key part of where the boundaries are, right? Am I attuned to what they really are asking in this moment and what they need? Or am I just am I trying to make the session about myself, or am I trying to fill the space up because I don't know what else to say, or am I just self-disclosing because I'm kind of unboundaried? And I think that session was really useful because even though it was the sort of first of many iterations of this kind of discussion with various supervisors, Jason and I have through time really thought and reflected a lot on this. Like, where is the boundary between it being a useful form of vulnerability and therapeutic sort of relatedness, and where is it essentially either unnecessary or a tool that's maybe more about my own insecurities as an individual. And I will own and share, I don't get this right all the time. I'm not trying to come at this from a position of like every single self-disclosure or vulnerability I share is right. Probably not. In fact, definitely not. There'll be moments where I've said something that I probably shouldn't have because it wasn't useful to the client in that moment, or I've misread the vibe, and they're not necessarily wanting someone to jump in the pool and go, I also get it. They want someone to throw them a flotation aid and just give them a space to get out the pool themselves. Like, there's lots of ways in which it can go. You never know how it's going to go, obviously, before you do it. But I would say, to answer your original question in a very long-winded way, I am absolutely certain that for myself, the way I feel comfortable practicing, it's a huge asset for my ability to connect with younger people in particular. And I've had that feedback from clients. I'm not just assuming, oh yeah, it might be helpful to them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, thank you. Excuse me. That makes sense. I mean, I asked you that because, I kind of knew, I didn't know, but I suspected you was going to answer it in the way you did.
Well, what
Um,
do you think? Because I know we're in different roles, and the boundaries as a therapist and as what you do are very different. But I'm just like, you also use a lot of your own experience in how you connect.
all right. So I always use this analogy, right? And it's, I don't know where I heard it. Maybe I've made it up. Maybe I nicked it off someone. Who cares? Who knows? But I'll say it anyway, right? And it's, um, you're on a plane, right? You're on a plane. You're 40,000 feet up in the air. You're not flying anytime soon, are you, Charlie?
Not until May, mate. We've got a while.
Okay, you'll forget about this by then. Um,
That are listening or on a plane, pause and
yeah. You're on a plane, 40,000 feet up in the air, right?
yeah.
And suddenly you realize the fucking jets are on fire.
Yeah.
Right, there's smoke, there's fire, and then everyone's starting to freak out, right? And you're met with this fear of imminent death. It's terror overcomes you, and you're in absolute fucking meltdown, right? Incapacitated with fucking unbearable seething fear. And then suddenly someone jumps up and addresses the plane and says, "Don't worry, everyone. Don't worry. I was on a similar plane not so long ago. Exactly the same thing that was happening. I got it down safely. Don't you worry. I'm here to tell the story. I got everyone down safe. Like, don't worry, I'll help you." And then there's a second guy that jumps up and says, "Don't worry, everybody. I've read the manual of how to fly this plane. And in such cases, I've been in a flight simulator, and I think I know what you're saying, about the getting it down. I've not actually done it, but I think I know enough information about it." Which one of those two would you trust? Which one would you go for to get us down?
Oh, 100% the first guy.
Yeah, of course, right? So,
First person, I associate. He didn't say it was a guy. But
yeah, but if you was to combine both of those,
yeah.
even better,
No, of course. I mean,
right?
you got all the different avenues, haven't you?
Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's like, why don't get both of them in? That's the way I see it,
Yeah.
right? So because it's not so black and white. Like, for some people, like that guy that did it the first time, just because he's landed once, he might fuck it up the next time. You know what I mean? Why not use both? Why not? If you've got a blend of both those scenarios, that's potent. That's gonna be good, right? And that's what you are, in my opinion. You are that blend because you've got, in part, you've got your own experience, which you can pepper a space with that if you see fit. But
Yeah.
you've also got the other part, which is the intellectual, studied, it's them two modalities, right? For me, I'm the dude who got the plane down with the jets were on fire, and I haven't read the manual. I've been through it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So I don't know, man. I say that to people when it's like when someone said to me, I sat in front of 10 therapists, or a parent will say, oh God, Johnny, I'm just picking a name out the area. Johnny is sat in front of 10 therapists and nothing's worked. Can you help him? What makes you different? And then I'll sit with Johnny and then, start engaging, and then he starts engaging because because I'm that guy who's been on the plane with the jets on fire. So usually, I'd want to point them to your direction, but you're so bloody busy.
It's one of the, I guess, the never-ending catch-22s of this industry is, I don't know if have you ever seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge?
Yeah, I mean, ages ago.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the scene, but the very famous sort of pivotal scene in the middle where he's just saying like, one more, just let me get one more to like save another life. Like, obviously, I appreciate him dragging people literally out of a war zone might, as an analogy, be quite salient, but it's obviously a very different thing to the people that send me an email and ask if they can meet up to have sessions. But I'm very much torn between that part of me that always wants to help one more person and that other part of me that knows that realistically my capacity is needing to be managed first and foremost, so that I make sure I do a really good job. And I think one of the things I won't name her for obvious confidentiality reasons, but one of my clients who I've always just we had such a good rapport. We finished our work together now a few years ago. It was such a good rapport, and I think there was a very good working alliance. She did a lot of very, very hard work on herself during the years that we were together. And I was always very astounded by both her bravery and her ability to actually just be very honest in the room. So she was quite, at times, a very confronting and challenging client for me. And I'll never forget once I had booked to go on annual leave, and I always give plenty of notice to my clients so that they're not sort of like blindsided by me just uprooting and leaving, particularly because I'm always sensitive that a lot of them have got already like abandonment or neglect trauma. But I had been on annual leave, I think, sort of, let's say 4 weeks earlier for a couple of weeks, and then I was going away for another week. And just because of circumstance, it was like family weddings and it just kind of happened that way. And I said to the client, so just a reminder that I'm not going to be here in 2 weeks. So next week's our last session before I go away for the break. She just turns around to me, she goes, fucking hell, you take so much leave. And I was just, I'd never really been faced with this. I was like, I guess objectively, yeah, I probably do. I probably take between 12 and 14 weeks off every year. I'm quite religious, if I can use that word, in my taking time off. And I really, for myself, I have family that I want to spend time with. I've got a wife and child. I really enjoy being a dad and being a husband. Like, I'm not one of those people who was born to like work, and then like the rest of the stuff around me will just kind of happen. I want to make time to go and do other things. But it's also so central to me being a good therapist. And I was really confronted in that moment with, again, if we think about self-disclosure, my original response was to want to defend myself, right? Like, as soon as she said that, I wanted to be like, well, like, no, like, it's not too much. Like, it's just the right amount, or like whatever you want to say to kind of diffuse the situation, or to put it back on her. Like, a lot of therapists I know do this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this as a technique in and of itself. Excuse me, but a lot of therapists I know would be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm wondering what it is about me taking a lot of annual leave that is bringing that out in you. So it's kind of like completely deflecting the responsibility in some respects on the situation that you have then put that client in. And I sort of found myself, after a while within the same session, kind of revisiting it once I've had a bit of time to reflect, and she sort of brought it back in herself anyway. So I was like, okay, if you're mentioning it twice, let's talk about it. And I kind of just was very honest. I was like, I do take a lot of annual leave, actually. I've never really had anyone point it out that sort of obviously, but yeah, I do. I'm aware that by the sort of standard model of therapy, I'm away a lot more than a lot of my colleagues. And she, in her very classic way, because she was very like this, and I actually loved that part of her, that sort of the confronting didn't just then get withdrawn. It wasn't like, oh God, I shouldn't have said that. It was like, no, we're gonna have this really difficult conversation. And I think rupture repair is a huge asset in therapy anyway. And she was like, well, why do you take so much leave? Like, what's the function of that? Because like, has it occurred to you that you basically aren't around a lot for us, the people you see who might need you in these really difficult moments? I think she was about to sit her A level, so it was also not a good time to go away, which I was aware of. And I said to her something that I have said to others since, and that I know is definitely true, even though I'm aware there is definitely a potential defended position within even this statement. But I said to her, do you know the honest truth is I know that I'm the kind of therapist where if I didn't take a lot of time off, I wouldn't be able to give as much as I do to the work that we do together. And I would rather be the kind of therapist that's away a little bit more, but incredibly present when I'm with you, than sort of you get 85% of me more of the year. And it was really interesting because I didn't know how that was going to land. I also don't know, and I will never know if it was the right thing to share. But it was interesting, her response, because she was sort of like, well, I find it annoying. She didn't sort of like back away from the fact that it was causing her distress. And we sort of spent that session and the week after session talking about it before I did leave for that week. But she was also like, I also totally get that. And actually, I quite like the fact that you're honest about the fact that you need that space. I'd never really thought about the fact that you need a break as well. So it was kind of nice to have it sort of acknowledged, and also then for me to have more time to reflect on my policies around taking time off and what's like appropriate. But it's hard because I mean, I've also made the mistake of not taking time off in the vein of wanting to be more available to people, and then almost like burning out by the end of that work zone. So it's definitely like it's a delicate balance, and I often find I'm
Yeah.
learning on the job as I say.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Charlie, for taking us through that. I'm a big believer that I'm suspicious, man. I always say that, suspicious. I'm suspicious of people who appear to be bulletproof. You
Yeah.
know, that just keep going and never stop, and just like machines. And it's like, how can you? That's not humanly. Is it humanly possible to do that? I mean, I can only talk for myself when I say, tried that one, burnout. I welcome a burnout when I do that, and I've had a few. And I was just talking to someone about that not so long ago. We was talking about burnout. Another person in our game actually, which is very common, and it's not just in this realm. That's for anyone. Could be a sport athlete burnout. You know, it could be anything.
Yeah, and I think like not just through the lens of burnout, but generally speaking, in my experience, the moments in my life I have tried to be bulletproof are the moments I feel most wounded. Um,
Mm,
like, and it's often the way, isn't it? Like, there's this sense of if I feel disempowered or if I feel vulnerable, and I want to kind of like reclaim power or like dismiss that vulnerability and look really strong, then I'll do something performatively bulletproofy. But it's not real, is it? I mean, that I'm almost a believer, and this is maybe a slightly cynical way of saying it, but for myself, I'm definitely of the belief that it's not that through time I become more secure, it's that I become more able to tolerate and understand my insecurities. Like,
yeah.
I am not this like every year I get more and more profoundly confident in who I am. It's like almost the opposite. It's like I become more aware that I'm not a very confident person in lots of ways. And that's okay. That's part of being a person, and that humanity, that vulnerability. Um, but yeah, I mean it's burnout's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I've definitely had a couple of burnouts in the last few years. I think the pandemic was a particularly difficult one for that, because suddenly the urgency I felt in my work, and I'm sure I mean, you're nodding along, yeah. I mean, most of us who I've spoken to in our industry suddenly felt that the urgency ramped up quite significantly. And then also because I work with young people a lot, there was a lot of what I would describe as like this has not happened before phenomena. Like,
Yeah.
the people talking to me about their sexual abuse. I'm used to people talking to me about their violent fathers or their, cold mothers. I mean, that's a generalization, but I'm
Yeah.
used to these dynamics that have happened in therapy, and they're extremely painful. They never become easy to hear, but you kind of get a little bit used to the narrative or the shared experience part. I've never heard anybody talk to me about not being allowed to go to school for 6 months because they can't afford to go and the school won't give them laptops. And like, whoa, this is new. Or like, I've never heard anyone talk about how their family have locked them in a room and aren't allowing them to leave because of the fact that they don't want anybody getting COVID. And it's just like, gee, this is really like change.
Yeah.
And it's just one example of burnout for me was around that time. But I've had more recently, I've had a sort of experience of being really ill. I had like a string of illnesses at the end of last year. And I said this to you, I think in a private moment, just the two of us. I wasn't sure whether it was a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Like, was I burnt out and then I got really ill? Or was I actually just really physically unwell and therefore it created
Yeah.
a sense of burnout by the end of this, trying to work through it? And I guess it's not really important which one it was. It's just to know that. And also, I'm a big fan of the body-mind connection. Like, I don't think any illness in and of itself is just as simple as you got it. Like, the body holds these.
Yeah. Yeah. My experience to that, the phantom illness, where did it come from? Why am I ill? For me, I always get ill when I'm run down. And when I'm run down, it's because I'm overworked or stressed.
Yeah.
And it results in me getting so ill that it's basically, I know this, I know my body well now, I know the algorithm of how it works, how it all plays out. If I'm taking on too much stress, other people's bullshit, and what I mean by bullshit is other people's crisis, other people's stuff. If I'm taking on too much of that stuff, which can happen if I allow it to, I start to really feel like really strained, like mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I will say. And that always results in me being bedridden, housebound with some phantom illness. I've got a viral, I'm really ill. End up just resulting in me being really sick. Like as if I've got a flu bug. Always, I know.
I'll give you a really interesting example of this. And of course, I'm aware that what I'm speaking about isn't necessarily researched enough for me to be like, this is what is happening. It's anecdotal at most of its level. But at the end of last year, if I had to describe how I was feeling before I got ill in terms of my workload, and this was linked to, new dad, doctorates, like there were lots of facts. It wasn't just my work with clients. Like that's one feature. I felt like I couldn't really breathe. What happened when I got my first illness? I got my first ever very serious chest infection and I was on pneumonia meds. It's almost like my body mirrored the symptoms I was already feeling emotionally. Like I felt like I was drowning and then I literally could not breathe. It was really. Now, obviously, that might be a coincidence. I might be in hindsight creating that metaphor or that meaning as more symbolic, but I know this is part again of like Van der Kolk's work and a bunch of people who have done, and I keep naming him, I could name hundreds, but the people that have done this extremely powerful sort of work on trauma and how it's held in the body and stored in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone now who brings any kind of physical pain or illness to my doorstep and is like, oh, it's just because of this. I'm like, hold on. There might be some psychological reason, if not completely manifesting because of.
Yeah. I'm a massive believer. I'm subscribed to shame, all things shaman. I am big time. I love it energetically. So, and I can't say it word for word, but the way they see it, and the way I see it now, because I've studied it, and I'm bought into it. I like the concept. It makes sense to me that we have if we see it like energetically, we have holes in our being, if you want to call it that. Being a human being, just being, energetically, the essence of being human. It makes sense to me that we have holes, that can leak out our energy, because they get. We get puncture wounds, if you want to call it that. I mean, this is, I'm saying it in a different way to how they say it or see it, but it's a similar concept. It's like if my being has puncture wounds in them, even if it's just one, two, or scattered throughout my being, um, that makes sense to me that I'm going to be not optimized to the full of my potential, and I'm
Yeah.
going to be struggling. So how do I repair those puncture wounds, metaphorically speaking? And for me, the only thing I know that works is to um, replenish, reset, rest, go on holiday,
Yeah.
you know,
Hey,
uh,
leave.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Turn your phone off, all of that stuff. And, I've created, since my last burnout, I was speaking about this just the other day, like, to someone, the last one I had, I swore I'm not going to do it again. So I've really realigned, I've really set strong boundaries like you of like how I'm going to practice my affairs, how I'm going to conduct myself, and how I'm going to, you know, conduct everything that I do in my life, including my work. So I've got enough um, downtime to prevent those puncture
Yeah.
them holes in my being that are going to let out vital energy that I need to give to first and foremost myself, but most just as importantly, if I'm going to help other people, what good am I to other people? Like you explained to your client, what good am I to you if I'm not optimized?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a reason they tell you to put your mask on first on the plane, right? It's the same thing. I think
Exactly.
there's a need to look after ourselves first and foremost. What I found difficult through the years, and it maybe speaks to some of those sort of spiritual punctures that you're talking about, is like if I feel like parts of myself are disintegrated. So maybe I'm working really hard at my job, I'm doing well at all things like dad and husbanding, but I'm kind of neglecting all my friends, or I'm not really spending time doing the hobbies that I really enjoy. I find those wounds, those punctures start to kind of develop through that. It's like a kind of actually, I need to not split myself off into like my work self, my family self, and
Mhm.
that self, and actually be more holistic. Like every day when I wake up and I go to bed, in the interim, and also, of course, while I'm asleep, but that's not really within my control. I am I am at the mercy of all of it together as a whole, and I need to be very mindful that, like, I mean, something I've learned, for example, from my last burnout is contingency time. Like, it's all well and good to go, I could work at this pace until my next break, but what if I'm working at a pace and I haven't built in the contingency if my daughter gets sick or I have a family bereavement or one of my clients has a really serious crisis? Like, I forget that actually it's not about working at like 100% all the time. It's like working at that level that allows there to be a bit more that can come out the other side if it needs to is important because that
Yeah.
I've made many times. Just like, oh, I'm absolutely fine. And I don't know,
Yeah.
agree, but I think being a man in this is potentially quite interesting because societally, even though I think it is evolving and changing slowly, there's still a lot of toxic masculinity in our culture and a lot of this like boys don't cry shit. And I cry all the fucking time. I mean, I'm literally in tears most movies I watch, but it's kind of one of those things where for me, I I sort of have to hold both. I have to hold the part of me that goes like, you should be doing more. You're not working hard enough, or like you're a man, like get on with it. It goes, like, fuck off. Like, I'm a person and I need breathing room. And sometimes I need a bit more than I think because actually I'm working harder, or harder is not always the right phrase, is it? Like, I'm working in a more intense way. Um, and maybe some of that capacity needs to be given even. So it's like, I'm not failing if I give myself 1 or 2 more hours break a week, just because actually if I fill those up, then I may be doing a worse job across the board. It's an interesting balance. And obviously, it comes,
Yeah.
it ebbs and flows. I
Yeah.
bubble summer always a bit easier than winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love winter for context. I'm not like one of those people that despises the cold, but it's just something I noticed. Summer's always been a little bit more room around the edges. Maybe there's more sunlight. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's for everyone. Like, and this people love. There are some people I know that just love the rain and love colder weather and wrapping up and staying in and it being dark. And you know, it has its moments. It's nice. It's cozy. You know, that is nice to do that because you can just rest and not feel guilty that, you know, it's nice weather out and you're stuck inside. It can be nice, but you know, being in the UK, man, it's long, isn't it? It's great. Again, that points to I need to go away. I need to go away. I need a break. I need some winter sun, you know, to recharge and up my energy levels, to get some vitamin D.
Yeah. I mean, I supplement. I'm not obviously encouraging everybody to do this. It's definitely not an advert for it, but I supplement vitamin D every day for exactly that reason. I know it's made a big difference to me for my mental actually since I've done that. But yeah, the getting away, the change of scene. I mean, I'm one of those people. I'm fundamentally quite I like enjoy my life. Like I've always had that part to me. So I'm fundamentally a kind of I look for fun and excitement, and I have a lot of people around me who I'm very blessed to know and feel I can sort of draw a lot of energy from and with.
Mm,
Um, but at the same time, I know that part of and a function of the jobs we do is like you've also got to be able to tolerate an awful lot of distress, and
yeah.
that can at different junctions in life be more or less of a toll. And often, actually, I don't know if you'd agree with me, mate, because I know that similarly you take on complex work. I mean, every person has their complexities, right? No one's simple, but um, I often find that actually it's not so much that the work with the clients is like the heavy part. It's almost more the like how I have to learn to incorporate that into my overall life is like the hard bit. So it's like when I'm
Mm,
with a client, I feel absolutely capable of holding what they bring for the most part.
mhm, yeah.
But it's like after the session finishes and I like go off and make my dinner, it's like, is it still infusing what I like? Is it playing its way into my relationships? Like it's kind of just working out how the whole thing works as a engine and organism.
That's an interesting one. So I love that. That's a really interesting because this is this is what I see in out there, out in the world, right? It's not just what you do and what I do and what other people do in this realm that we're in. It's everywhere. So a common thing is I'm just gonna use lawyer, right? So a lawyer, someone who is a lawyer. Now, it's fair to say I've known and I know lawyers, and I've worked with people who are lawyers, and I've worked with people whose dads are lawyers. So when a lawyer comes home to the family, does he take his lawyer head off
Yeah.
and be dad? Does that happen? No, I can't answer that. Right? I could, but I'm not gonna.
Lawyers around the world are listening.
Right, right. So, if you're a lawyer, are you going home to your family and taking your lawyer head off, mate?
Yeah.
Woman, man, don't matter, whatever. Are you taking your lawyer head off when you go home to your family? Are you becoming dad? Are you becoming mum? Or have you still got your fucking lawyer head on?
Yeah.
Right? Now, I've got a lot of my own observations for that, and I'm not going to share them. Um, so, you know, for you,
Mm.
when Charlie does his last engagement of the day, session, whatever you want to call it, does Charlie then, um, you know, return, walk into the front room, and are you then suddenly dad? How can you do that? You know, is it possible? What's your process to be able to do that? Or do you find that you're, you know, halfway through the evening and you've still got your head on and you're still regurgitating all of these cases that you've had to deal with that day, no different to the lawyer, right? And that's the same. It could be, you know, if you're a policeman, policewoman, a fireman or firewoman, you know, or whatever you're doing. I mean, anyone listening to this, they can. It's relative. You know, if you're a teacher or whatever the fuck you are, whatever you do, can you take that like Wurzel Gummidge head off? I don't know if people will remember Wurzel Gummidge. Look it up. Wurzel Gummidge used to have a head that he used to take off. You know, and be able to put on the role. What role are you playing? What role are you in? You know? So for me, I have to consciously do that. I have to consciously, but, you know, I have the luxury, you know, I don't have that family scenario, that situation where I've got to step into being a dad, you know. I've not become a dad yet. So yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a tough one. It's almost, it's one of like the questions. It's such a good question because, I mean, I could tell you what I do, but I also know a lot of it's quite unconscious. I don't really think always about the strategies that kind of allow me to maybe move into different hats or different roles throughout the day. I do a lot of trauma release from the body. So I do a lot of, what the fuck is that word? Polyvagal release. I do a lot of those kinds of exercises. That's been really helpful at the end of the day, particularly if I've had a lot of trauma. I mean, I vividly remember my, I once booked to see 9 clients in one day, which in hindsight was fucking psychopathic.
That's a lot of clients, man.
I'll disclaimer, right? That was fucking unethical and I shouldn't have done it. And I absolutely regretted it because I felt like pickled shit for about 3 days afterwards. But I agreed to see 9 clients on the proviso that at that moment in my practice, I was seeing, I think, 24, 25 people a week. I wanted to take it, and this is, again, in terms of like you reap what you sow, right? I wanted to go and play golf with a mate of mine. He was in town. It was the only day you could do. And I was like, I could move some of my clients from, if they're willing. Obviously, I didn't agree to the golf until I knew the clients would be okay to move because I wasn't going to just last minute uproot people. So I gave people, I think it was like a couple of weeks notice. And I was like, could we by any chance see each other on the Monday instead of the Wednesday? And I moved everything from the Wednesday over so I could see this mate. Excuse me. And I went into that Monday. And at that moment, I remember being like, I said to my wife, Lucinda, I said, look, this is going to be like a hell of a work day. But I feel like because no one's in any real obvious crisis at the moment and everyone's kind of ticking along, it's not going to be too much. It was as if God, whoever the powers that be are out there, heard me say that and just started giggling.
We're gonna fuck you up.
We're going to learn a valuable lesson today, Rowley. I literally remember the first client started in tears and I was like, oh, geez, like what on here? And they had, if I remember correctly, the first client split up with their partner literally the night before and was all over the place. Like one of those sessions where their sense of self is not in the room really. They're just kind of like venting, walking, and they're angry one moment and the next minute they're kind of just back to crying. And it was very disconnected. Finished that session, did have 2 afterwards that were more kind of the routine, if you will, or the formula of the sessions I was used to having with them from the weeks before. Still, I mean, every therapy session, as you know, with every piece of work you do, there's a heaviness to it. It's not like you sort of light your way through it. And then the 2 after lunch back to back had both been abused that week. And it was one of those ones where I was so broken at the end of that day because it felt like 9 would have been too many, even if all of them had been in their routine. And I recognize it was an early career mistake and I would never do it again. But it was one of those ones, by the time I was seeing the last client, like, you know, I don't know if you've ever driven your car and your dashboard is like flashing at you, like, get to the fucking station. And you're like, there isn't one for like 10 miles. Like, I've just got to work this out. And you're suddenly like walking on the side of the road with a jerry can being like, what is my life? That was the last client of that day. And luckily, because this client and I at the time had been working together already for, I think, about 9 months, he was quite, we're still actually working together today, interestingly, but he's one of those clients who I think, because he's also quite therapeutically minded and he sort of works in the industry himself, I think he was a bit more aware of what might be going on. And he kind of, not that it was his role to hold space for me in that moment, because that's a role reversal and that's a very big no-no in therapy, but he was someone I was able to say, I'm tired. Feel like today you're getting less of me. That's going to be probably a real experience. I'm going to do my best to be present with you, etc. And we actually ended up having a perfectly okay session, but I got home and I was just like
Look, I salute you for having the integrity, to say what you did to that, because I'm the same. Like, if I'm not feeling 100%, I'll say to someone, I'm not feeling great. Like, do you really need this right now? Because I don't. And can we speak tomorrow? But of course, you can't do that sometimes. They need you. That's
So
what so but to just have the integrity, just to be able to say, the honesty and the respect of the client, just to say, "Look, I'm not feeling too great at the minute, okay? Are you alright with that if I hold this space still?" I think that's fucking great, mate. I really respect you for that. I think that's amazing.
well, I'm always trying because I know what it's like to be a child that doesn't have any autonomy. I'm always trying to give as much autonomy as possible in the room. And I think part of that is, yeah, recognizing that a simple thing like I'm tired or there's something going on in my personal life that whilst it's not going to distract from our space now, I just want you to know that it's happening. I mean, these are like little things that a lot of therapists are like, no, no, you should never say that to a client. I think, well, if you've been working with someone for a couple of years, you've got that relational depth and they kind of understand you, they're going to notice it anyway.
Mm.
I've always resented this. I've heard therapists I know speak about this, and I've always challenged it in my mind anyway. I don't necessarily outwardly always challenge it, but people who say like, "Oh, our clients are all too unwell to notice what's going on for us anyway," as if it's almost like we sit in the room and if we're having like a really bad day, they're not going to pay attention because they're too in their own shit. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's a massive generalization about clients. Like they don't always come into the room in crisis or like totally low. But secondly, some of the most perceptive things that I've ever witnessed in a session have happened when a client has noticed something I haven't even noticed in myself yet. And you have that
Yeah.
to connect and relate. So I fundamentally disagree with that as a premise. But yeah, I guess at the end of the day, it comes back to something that the first person on my doctorate who trained us said that has stayed with me forever. She said, no matter how good of a therapist you are, you're always a fucking human first.
Yeah. I've got to remember that.
Love that phrase because
Yeah.
I forget that all the time in my when I'm really trying to do a good job is when I lose sight of this. I'm a person as well.
Yeah, that's a mantra that you need to tell yourself. I have to say the same, like, I come first, man. I have to be a selfish bastard about it because I have to. I can't help people if I'm not, I've got to practice what I fucking preach, man.
Well, the risk, mate, of therapizing you, which is not what this space is about, I would even ask you to, or encourage you, I'm not going to ask you, I'd encourage you to reframe even the way you say it. Like, it's not selfish, that it's self-loving, self-caring. I mean, I think we all too often in our society pathologize people as being selfish or self-interested when actually they're just able to recognize what they need. Like,
Oh,
why
yeah.
not out for that? That was just the use of language, but
No, Charlie, thank you. No, 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 you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's true. It's true what you're saying. It's true what I'm saying. It's so vital. And I think that we all need to look at that and see, what level are we applying that, if at all,
always learn.
or,
You know, dude.
absolutely, man. So I feel like we'll be closing it up in a bit. I want to just ask you, um, going forward,
Mm.
um, because you've got your own practice, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, what does the future of that look like for you? Are you looking to just expand? Because with everything that you've discussed and shared, it sounds like how would you do that unless you expanded like you would with a practice and get other people or into your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very candid. I don't think that much about the future. I not because I don't think it's important to. I know that any plan I make, it tends not to work out like that anyway. So sort of why waste the effort? I have a general intention, let's say, for the future of my working career, and I'm really enjoying my work in the NHS in this eating disorder unit. I would love to, when my doctorate finishes, maybe do some more work, if not directly for the NHS, in some kind of charity or low cost service, because I've noticed that actually, whilst private practice is wonderful, I really enjoy it, and I have I've learned more from my clients in private practice than I could ever have imagined. It does slightly pigeonhole me into work that maybe mitigates other groups or people that I could work with that maybe either can't afford private practice or aren't going to find me because of the sort of more general structures of how it's put together. And I really feel like I get a lot of fulfillment from working in something that sort of feels like it's maybe more of that giving back rather than just it's a job, if that makes sense.
100%, yeah.
I don't know what it will look like in the future, but yeah, I think expanding my private practice back to a slightly wider ranging capacity, just because at the moment I've reduced it because I'm doing the doctorate and the NHS stuff. Um, Maybe, yeah, keeping my finger on the pulse with some charity work or some low cost services, maybe NHS. I'm really enjoying working in NHS. I'm just aware it's not so easy to just like dip in and out of. You kind of have to find a role in it. But I think the one thing I can say with absolutely no hesitation is that whatever the future of it holds, I will definitely be doing this for the rest of my life. I absolutely love it, and it's so beyond a job for me. Like it's a vocation. I know was cliched words, a career, etc. But it's fundamentally entwined with my way of understanding the world, and I think it's quite unique in therapy. We are I said therapy, mental health, like we are our work, aren't we? In many respects,
Yeah.
model a lot. So I like the fact that it also keeps me on my toes. It helps me grow as a person because I never want to be that early 20s arrogant. I've got life by the balls and I know exactly what I'm doing kind of attitude because it near destroyed me. So I'd rather be in the sort of, yeah, I'm learning. Life is complex. Let me learn from others about the subtleties and complexities and just keep tolerating the not knowing, which is a big
Mm.
guy that likes control and knowing.
Sounds very fruitful, what you're describing. And I'm a massive fan of what you do, Charlie. I wish I could work with you more, but you know, it is what it is because you know, you the way you run things, you know, you're limited to your resources. I'm the same though, you know, there's only so much I can give of myself to people. So I'm the same as you. I think that's why we see things very similar, you know. So I know that whatever you go on to do, and I love what you said about that. You know, I'm a big advocate myself of, you know, for every pound I might generate from this, what I do, you know, I want to give a pound away, so to speak. You know, I think that's a really good, solid foundation for having humility, and not losing yourself in this game, and in life in general, because it's really easy to do that in this world that we're living in. It's a really fucking mad, you know, just to touch on this, I'm interested in your thoughts. The generational, because of the tech stuff and the 20 somethings, even younger, do you think they are a little bit too ahead of themselves? And what I mean by that is we're from the era, I know I am, I believe you are. I'm sure there's some people listening to this that will go, yeah, I am too. From the era where we realize and we know that we've naturally had to progress to get to where we've got to.
Mm.
And it's taken, you know, hard work,
Yeah.
and experience, life experience, longevity, ups and downs, you know. And from where I'm sitting, I see a lot of younger people who just feel quite entitled, actually, if I'm going to be fucking honest about it. They're like, I don't want to do that bit. I just want it straight away. Don't want to do all the fucking all that what you lot did. I want to do it this way. I can do it this way.
Yeah. I mean, I recognize what you're saying and definitely agree that I've seen, I can't generalize it to an entire generation of people, but I've certainly seen people who are younger who are maybe more entitled or have more of a sense of, I'm not willing to put the work in to get the results. But I also think, mate, if I'm being completely candid, that not us, like you and me specifically, but the generations, generally speaking, above those people have created a world that has allowed them to think that way because of, I mean, I've got a very good friend who's I don't, influence is not the right word, but he's a very well known person, and he does like stuff on social media. Let's say, I guess influencer probably is the right person. And like that's very impressive, and he does work really hard. Like, make no mistake about it, it's not an easy industry to be in. But I think we've created a world that has told young people you can kind of have it all at your fingertips. Like, you can lie in your bed and get food delivered. You can lie in your bed and get a date sorted for tomorrow night. You can lie in your bed and you can get make millions of pounds playing games or doing like posts on Instagram. And I think we just have maybe slightly shot ourselves in the foot as a society. I'm really talking primarily Western lensing here, but because we villainize quite a lot young people for their choices and forget that we're playing a massive role in where they're making them. So I would say maybe it's less of a, even when I said the word entitlement, I could hear the other voice in my head going like, not that they're entitled necessarily, it's that they're maybe lost or have been sort of, I don't know, if you take somebody and you teach them a certain way of existing, you can't then turn around and be like, well, fuck you for like that.
Yeah.
Hard, because I also know that, like, yes, we are seeing objectively higher levels of, for example, social, what's the word? Like antisocial behavior. We're seeing higher levels of sort of oppositional behavior. We're seeing high levels of lack of concentration, like lack of focus, lack of motivation, lack of ethic. But I see it as a much more macro issue than just here's a generation of people that don't fucking get it. Because equally, like I said, I've had 12-year-olds in my practice recently who they're very motivated to work. Like,
Yeah.
not like this at all. They totally understand that there's a grind ahead of them. But yeah, it's a very complex social structure issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love the way you answered that, man. It's wicked. Very broad sense of, yes, it's opened my mind up because I'm really quick to just go, entitled little fuckers, all of that. So I can step back, listen to someone like yourself say, no, well, there's this. And I'm like, yeah, actually, that makes sense. It does make sense. And deep down, I know that. It's just, why is someone appearing to be entitled? Well, maybe they just need a little bit of guidance. And that's where we come in, it's just say, look, have you thought about this? Cool, interesting. Wicked, man. All right, Charlie, feel like we're gonna have to say goodbye to each other now, which is fills me with sadness.
It fills me with sadness too, mate. But I do know that the second we hit the off button, it's not like we're not going to see each other again. So that continued relationship gives me a smile and a reason to not feel that sadness succumbing so much.
It brings me hope.
Yeah.
All right, mate. All right. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to probably, am I all right to put your like your email or some sort of contact in?
Absolutely, yes. You can put my email, you can put my website, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. We'll make sure that happens. And spoiler alert: if you need someone who never goes on holiday, Charlie's not your man.
No, you're looking for someone who's permanently available. I'm absolutely not your guy.
Yeah. Okay, man. All right, Charlie. Look, thanks so much for making time for this.
Big love, Dave, and thank you for having me on. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thanks, man. It's been a pleasure. All right, take it easy, bro.
You too.
See you later, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.